Everybody, please. Okay, everybody, good morning. Good morning, everybody. So, welcome back. As we say in the Jewish culture, Shabbat is coming. It's been a long, but an intense, but I think productive week. So we're one more day, and we can be free for the weekend and chill out and hopefully do wonderful things. And I think today we have, this morning we have a wonderful, two wonderful people who will be presenting important issues. The first person that will speak is Mandisa Fatyela. Mandisa is an old friend and colleague, and I can say a comrade. I don't know if people in this room even know what a comrade is, but she was a comrade, is a comrade. I'll give a lecture on what a comrade is one day. Mandisa is from Cape Town, Guguletu in South Africa, and lives in the capital Pretoria in South Africa with her family. Mandisa has a master's degree in sociology from Concordia University in Montreal, and an MA in policy development and practice from the University of Cape Town. Mandisa is also trained in international human rights by the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights at the University of Lund in Sweden, and has a Gestalt consultant. She's a Gestalt consultant by the Gestalt Institute in Ohio. Mandisa is for more than 26 years working in public policy and government. Mandisa is currently doing research on issues related to her PhD on government policy. She's a human rights activist, a public policy analyst, and a strategic planner, and a constitutionalist at heart. The young man next to me is Fatyela Asefa Dawit. Fatyela has been appointed as the director of the African program here at ISGAP, and his goal is to expand our work in Africa and related matters. He's currently working on developing projects in Morocco, Rwanda, and South Africa. We're also talking about a very, I think, an amazing, I'll be very brief, an amazing project that will bring African American and Jewish American youth to a program similar to this, and then to bring them to West Africa to see West African culture and the history, the origins of the slave trade, bring them to Auschwitz, and then to the free land of Israel, and to learn about the culture, not the images, but the culture that people have. And I think this could, make people more conscious. If we could pull this off, it would be incredible. Thank you. Fatyela has been actively engaged in community service, advocacy, and leadership development. He has managed 2 Jewish agency absorption centers. These are places where immigrants come to Israel to integrate into society. They're sort of temporary residents and communities. So he managed 2 of these centers. It's very important work. And he helped to oversight thousands of new immigrants from around the world, but particularly Ethiopia to Israel. His work includes the protection of immigrants during the difficult time of the Lebanon War in 2006. Fatyela also served as the executive director of Tribeca, which is an advocacy organization for justice and equality for Ethiopians living in Israel. Today, the lecture, so Mandisa will go first. Mandisa's talk is entitled Reimagining a World Without Racism, Prejudice, Discrimination, and Antisemitism, Why Some Members of our current generation have not learned from the Holocaust and from apartheid. A very important subject, and it doesn't get more serious. And Fatyela, the title of his talk is Anti-Semitism, Racism, and Ignorance. So Mandisa, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you'll come here next year in person, and the floor is yours. The floor is yours.
I hope there will not be another virus though. We never know. We live in interesting times. Hi everyone. I wish I could see you all. I was there in 2018. And let me just quickly get into my presentation and what triggered this. What triggered this title actually South Africa itself. And probably what's going on in the US that I've been watching on TV. I'm concerned about the new generation that seem not to be learning from the past. It could be a few people, but even if there are few, I think we have an obligation to make sure that young people learn from the past. And it's not only about what's happening in the world only, but it's also about what's happening in South Africa. Let me quickly say that my focus would be on what measures are in the South African Constitution to make sure that we as South Africans, we do not promote hate amongst each other. And if you do step out of the line, the Constitution of South Africa will deal with you in a manner that is possible. But we hope, or I hope, that we won't necessarily have to get there with a new generation. For example, more than a month ago, there are many incidents that have happened here in South Africa. But more than a month ago, or 2 months ago, a student at the University of Stellenbosch was disciplined and was expelled from the university. This is a white student. Why? He was coming, according to the story in the newspapers, he was coming from a bar with his colleagues. He decides to go into a room of a black student who was asleep. The door was not closed or locked, locked. And he decides to open the door and urinate on his computer and books. So how old is this young man? 19 years old. When did South Africa become free? 1994. So in South Africa, there's a term for these young people who were born after Mandela was released from prison, and we call them born frees. That shook the entire country, because the question was, why it looks like it's difficult for some of us to get rid of some of these apartheid tendencies in our country. So I just thought that let me share with you what our Constitution says that will get you into trouble if you come to South Africa to promote hate, or if you are in South Africa and you are so full of hate that you can't control yourself. We do have Chapter 9 or constitutional institutions that are in place. We have enough arsenal of legislation that will deal with these tendencies. But I must say, before I quickly get into my presentation, that the issue of this young man urinating on a black student laptop and books, and then when the black student wakes up and say, "What are you doing? What are you doing in my room?" And these guys use the K word, which I won't repeat here. I'll be very happy if you can Google. It's like the N word in South Africa. To say this is what he does to stuff that is owned by the K people. Now, I just thought that let me start by saying, as the world, we are obligated to do better and go beyond the formal curriculum development and academic scholarship to fight racism and anti-Semitism. I listened very carefully to Professor Katya or Maverach on Tuesday or Monday, who said that anti-Semitism is racism. So we need to reflect on many of these concepts and see what we can do and why we seem to have young people now joining and doing wrong things that they know they shouldn't be doing, but also doing them, some of them doing them consciously, knowing that they will get into trouble. Like here in South Africa, you just don't you will get into trouble if you actually embark on any behavior that is deemed to be, what's the right word? Let me just say silly or discriminatory. Now, So I just thought that maybe if I use the South African Constitution as a case study and open up my presentation with what Mandela bequeathed to us as South Africans as the first president of the country. You must remember that this constitution, the first person who presided over this document was Mandela himself as the first president. And Mandela said, one of the most important milestones of our young democracy was the recent adoption of our constitution. It lays a firm basis for the religious and cultural freedom of all our people. He continued to say, we place our vision of a new constitutional order for South Africa on the table, not as conquerors prescribing to the conquered. We speak as fellow citizens to heal the wounds of the past with the intent of constructing a new order based on justice for all. Now, Mandela knew that Black people are a majority in South Africa. And Mandela knew that one day we may be forced probably or even think of retaliation. So Mandela and his colleagues, when they adopted this constitution, prepared us to be able to act civil towards each other, but also know that other organs of state or the courts that are responsible for the interpretation of this constitution to guide us when incidents like those of the university student of Stellenbosch take place, because those incidents, they tend to actually get Black people in the country very, very angry under the collar. Now, I'm starting, my slide is talking about Arthur Chackalson. Arthur Chackalson, the late Arthur Chackalson was a judge, the first Chief Justice of our Constitutional Court. He's of Jewish heritage. And he was consciously so appointed by Mandela as the first justice of the new democratic South Africa. It was not a mistake. Arthur Chackalson was there defending Mandela when Mandela was arrested with the other Rivonia trialists, if you Google the Rivonia trial. So it was not a mistake. So Arthur Chackalson, George Bizos, and others were there. But also Mandela was mindful that there are many Jewish people who were part of the liberation struggle in South Africa. Arthur Chackalson and Justice Goldstone and others were there as well, but also operating from the legal sphere. So I think in Mandela's way, he was making a statement by appointing Arthur Chackalson to be the first Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court. But I want you to reflect on what Chackalson said amongst the many statements that he has given as the Chief Justice of that court. He said the very reason for establishing the new legal order and for vesting the power of judicial review of all legislation in the courts was to protect the rights of minorities and others who cannot protect their rights adequately through the democratic process. Those who are entitled to claim this protection include the social outcasts and marginalized people of our society. Coincidentally, I was reading the Sunday Times of the previous Sunday when I saw this. It was captured in an article that I was reading. Then I thought that let me share it with you so that you process who this man was, who was the first Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court. I can therefore say to you that anti-Semitism will not be tolerated in South Africa, but this does not mean that all is well in our country. As I've said to you, that we still have to deal with issues of the legacy of racism. I've just quoted one case, but if you Google South Africa, you can read more about certain incidents of racism that are really troubling. Now you may ask yourself, how do you feel as Black South Africans in particular about anti-Semitism? On this note, I can probably just share with you that most Black South Africans who are in the majority, remember, it's not just a small majority. We're talking about people who are like 80%, who constitute 80% of the population of South Africa. They are probably captured in bread and butter issues, but what they are concerned about is racism and prejudice and discrimination against anyone whenever that rears its ugly head. So it's important, therefore, that we actually pay attention to what this constitution of this small country at the tip of Africa says and probably wants to share with the world. Very quickly, let me just refer to a quote that Archbishop Tutu said in talking about Mandela. Archbishop Tutu, who passed on last year, warned us about banalizing the meaning of Mandela as the first. Mandela is a human being, and I guess as the first president of the Republic. But also, he knew that Mandela was never going to promote any attack on race, ethnicity, or religion. But I also want to capture what Cornel West, when he visited South Africa, said. He said something very mindful, very profound, which I thought I should share with you as you reflect on what to do with this generation that seem to be probably not have learned from both the Holocaust and Apartheid. Cornel West said, the question is, who are you going to be in the meantime, in the interim, in this time and space? You don't get out of time and space alive who you really are when you take off that mask, when you don't play that role. As I've said, Cornel West visited South Africa and they gave lectures on what was then called, it was a workshop on the meaning of Mandela. And Cornel West, grappling with the issues of America, also said Mandela was a grand unifier, but also Mandela was from a culture of a democratic culture. He was baptized in a democratic culture of being accountable, of accepting criticism, and also accountability. Well, to proceed, I just want to say it is, we all know that it's well documented that there is a rise of right-wing organizations in the world, anti-Semitism, racism, and other forms. And my proposal is therefore that we get focused as people who are involved with these issues in making sure that we have both strong and international legal frameworks to deal with these issues. As I've said before, South Africa, which is the focus of this presentation, I would really share with you what we have as part of trying to educate the young and the restless about not engaging in anti-Semitism or racism or prejudice and discrimination. You know the history of South Africa and the history of Calvinism. If you don't, I will encourage you to go and Google. When we took over this country, we were obviously, the government of the day was dominated by the Afrikaners. And the Afrikaners saw themselves as the chosen people of God. Very interesting. You see, when you invoke God in your trespasses, it becomes a bit awkward and interesting. But the Afrikaners, guided by the Calvinist ideology, saw themselves as the chosen people of God. If you go into one of the publications that were edited by Dr. Small, you will read a bit about what one of the contributors in those publications said, Mr. Shane, about Afrikaner ethno-nationalism. I won't dwell into that, but I just wanted to provide that as a context For those who are not familiar with South Africa, you understand that we're from a past of ethno-nationalism. We're from a past where people believe that they are the chosen people of God. But we are also mindful that apartheid was declared a crime against humanity. In fact, most people seem not to understand South Africa who live outside South Africa, especially Black people in the African continent. Those that I've interfaced with, they always ask me that, how come we treat white people as the same as us? I always say to them, go and read about our history. Mandela was not mistaken when he said, we need to celebrate our diversity and live and try and live peacefully as a people. You find that in some of my colleagues in the African continent, they ask us why we treat white people as if they are from South Africa. They don't understand. To me, it's like asking why in America you have white Americans and whether white Americans should go back to where they come from. But there is that subtle also questioning of the South African state. And they don't understand that our constitution enjoins us to celebrate our diversity and nothing else but our diversity. And in South Africa, you have white population, which constitute of people of Jewish heritage, Portugal, people from Portugal, people from all over the world, if you can, and the Afrikaners, obviously. And maybe we can discuss about that, some of these issues related to Afrikaners, maybe next year, if I am there. But I just thought that let me touch on what Harold Volpe, one of the veterans in our liberation struggle, when he categorized South Africa as a place where you can actually apply the theory of colonialism of a special type. And what triggered this for me was reading one of the volumes that were edited by Dr. Small, when he actually referred to the processes of globalization. But to just caution all of us that South Africa is not a perfect country and is also subjected to the processes of globalization as captured in that volume that was edited by Dr. Small. So Harold Volpe said, South Africa, racial domination is not in contradiction to, but a condition of capitalist development in South Africa. That was a mouthful.
Mandisa, you have about 5 more minutes, okay?
Okay, I'll just jump.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Now, you can read this on your own, what the American Ruth Bader Ginsburg, when he visited Egypt, about the history of about the Constitution of South Africa. You can read that on your own. And the South African Constitution is underpinned by the values of human dignity, the achievement of equality, and the advancement of human rights. And also all that is captured in the Bill of Rights. And also it is underpinned by the bill, by the principle of social justice. So the Bill of Rights enjoins us that not to violate each other's rights, because human rights in South Africa guarantees freedom of association, belief and opinion and expression, equality, and privacy. South Africa has South Africa has a number of Chapter 9 constitutional institutions that are tasked with the protection of human rights. We have the Constitutional Court, we have the South African Human Rights Commission, we have the Public Protector, we have the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious, and Linguistic Communities. It's quite a long one. We have the Equality Court, we have the Commission for Gender Equality. Now you ask yourself, how is it possible that we have young people who want to go back and repeat the same mistakes that the people who came before them committed? But also the Bill of Rights also speaks to the limitation of all rights. So this means therefore that you cannot, or we are not allowed in South Africa to speak to engage in hatred, because you have freedom of expression and freedom of speech and freedom of association and freedom of religion. You have to be mindful that other people also enjoy the very same rights. So the freedom of speech does not guarantee you to insult other people and saying that you are claiming your rights, because the Equality Court and other courts may have to deal with your case. And a few cases actually have served before the Equality Court to give effect to the constitutional principle of ensuring that we do not engage in hate speech when we deal with each other as South Africans on a daily basis. As I've alluded to before, the Constitution gives us rights to dignity, freedom of expression, equal protection and benefit of the law, and freedom and security. Now, there are other laws in South Africa giving effect to the work of these Chapter 9 or constitutional institutions. And we have the Promotion of Administrative of Justice Act, the Promotion of Access to Information Act. We have the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Equality Act. And if you feel that your rights have been violated or somebody has engaged in hate speech towards you, you can approach any magistrate's court in South Africa and get your case to serve before the Equality Court. It's actually that one not an expensive exercise to engage in, because litigation is expensive, that I understand very well, but it's not that expensive to actually do that here when it comes to issues serving before the Equality Court. Now, the rest of this, we'll talk about what the South African Human Rights Commission is supposed to do to actually protect all of us as citizens. It is there to promote, protect, develop a culture of human rights, and monitor and assess the implementation of those rights. Now, it's quite interesting that with the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious, and Linguistic Communities, you can also go to that court if you feel that your religion is being undermined or insulted. The public protector has been very active in the past few years, and it's a very important office that is supposed to deal with all matters of state and matters. Anyone in South Africa can refer a matter to them. If you wake up and you say, I'm Jewish and I feel I am being discriminated against, and this is the evidence that I have that I'm being discriminated against, you can actually approach any of these Chapter 9 or constitutional institutions to deal with those matters. Now, briefly, I just want to highlight that. How will you know that your right is being violated? If you look there, you have to reflect on the following questions: who is protected by the right? What is protected by that right? And who is prohibited from that right? Sorry. In conclusion, I just want to say to people that it's very important, I think, for people to begin to relate to the South African Constitution and to study the constitutional principles contained therein, because that could also be assisting to lay groundwork for other countries that have not adopted some of these constitution, to ensure that all citizens that live in the various different countries are actually protected by the law. But I also want to emphasize, in conclusion, the notion of making sure that we review and reflect also on the legal frameworks in our respective countries and make sure that they are progressive and are responsive to the current challenges of today, but also to ensure that we manage and we prevent people from engaging in acts that have caused harm and hate before, and reflect on the impact of the Holocaust and apartheid in our societies. On that note, I rest my case. I know that you promote apartheid as apartheid, but I'm South African, so we call it what it is, apartheid. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mandisa. Thank you very